I'm not sure if we'll have any more sign-ins. So good morning, everyone. My name is John Mackenzie. I've been around in the analytical instruments business for 30 odd years. I've had various jobs and tasks during that time. Let me just go back to my webinar control page. No, that's not what I wanted it to do. My goodness, it's all going wrong. It's all going wrong. Bear with me just a moment. And I think I'm going to have to stop sharing just a moment. Okay. I think we have a few more sign-ins. Right. Last chance to join. So my name is John Mackenzie. I've been around the industry for about 35 years. Today we're going to talk about Compass. We'll start with some of the basic setup in Configuration Manager, talk a little bit about groups and projects and users and all kinds of other things that make Compass such a versatile and quite well respected product. All of these things are needed so that you can track who's using it, when they're using it, how they're using it, and to ensure that you have compliance to 21 CFR 11. We will also look at building a method, look at some of the instrument sections, some of the run sections, post-run, that kind of thing. We'll build some sequences, looking at doing just a single sample, and then looking at doing multiple samples. We'll then have a little look at doing some reports, both single reports on a per sample basis and summary reports where you're maybe reporting the whole sequence of results in one page. We'll look at building a calibration curve and using reprocessing lists to review and recalculate the data that you may have collected. So we'll get started with some of these things, and let's see how we do. So Compass is made up of two main sections. You have the main CDS, which is this section here, and you have what's called Configuration Manager. Now, Configuration Manager shouldn't be needed for routine operation of the system. You definitely don't need to. Is my screen sharing? No, my screen sharing is not working. Share. Better. Sorry. I showed a little presentation. My screen sharing wasn't working. I can only apologize for that. The content of the little PowerPoint I gave is fairly minimal. It is basically just lists. If we look at Configuration Manager, we can see some of the sections within Configuration Manager. So we talked a little bit about groups. Groups you can think about in terms of different laboratories within an organization. So Compass is registered to an organization, and then there are labs or different groups within that organization. You can see that we have a few set up. Within each laboratory or within each group, you would then have projects that are running, and the projects will contain both users and instruments that are used as part of that project. If we have a look at the users, we can have a long list of users. Unlike other systems, we do not license the number of users that we have on the system. The number of users can be basically unlimited. That gives you some logistical problems, because if you're using it in a client server environment, all of those users have to have a Windows account as well, and that would involve CALs and that kind of thing. Each of these users can have a user profile. The user profile allows you to control everything that the user can do and see. Now, you can see from the list here, there is a long, long list of things that users can see and change, and that you can control every aspect of that. And if you block a user from having a particular functionality within Compass, what that will mean is the buttons or the controls for that just don't show up in Compass when that user is logged in. So it is very secure, and there is quite a lot of certainty that if you the permissions and privileges that you give to users are quite tightly controlled. We also have what's called administrator users, and the administrator users similarly have a profile, and there are a set of things that they are allowed to do, and it is exclusive to that group. Now, that would be the lab manager or the quality manager, or whoever, or the team leader, whoever is controlling particular groups. Now, even within that, you can have an ultimate super manager, if you like, who can control and see everything. And then you can divide down privileges to different project managers or different group managers so that they can control particular aspects of their groups and their projects without actually getting involved in other people's. And part of this also allows who can do electronic signing, so normal users wouldn't be allowed to sign documents, and here you can control who can sign and who can't sign. If we move a little further down the list, we have what's called the systems. Now, systems is not something that users would routinely be doing anything with. Managing users and managing user profiles, yes, the manager probably is doing that maybe on a weekly or a monthly basis, depending on what the staff turnover looks like and what the types of samples and sample changes that maybe come through. But systems, maybe not so much, because the systems tends to be governed by what hardware they have available. And most laboratories are not buying new hardware every week or every month. Mostly it is maybe a quarterly or an annual activity where they are adding or removing some instrumentation. Again, within any given instrument, you can control and see everything that is possible. You can completely configure the instrument. You can control how it looks on the screen when you get into the main CDS. You can see what the configuration is. You don't really have much control in what shows up in the screen, because what shows up in the screen is determined by the actual hardware rather than any setting that you might make. But Compass still needs to be aware of the configuration and how it's going to interact with it. If we move a little bit further down, we also have what are called systems. Basically, these are PCs. So they are client PCs that would allow you to do some things from a client onto the main server, and therefore influence a system, or maybe collect data, or set up sequences, or whatever your privileges allow. My particular system today is a standalone system, so I only have one station. Remembering all of these different settings, and there are quite a lot, and I understand that we have sort of gone through them quite quickly. This is basically just a 1 hour taster of some of the things that Compass can do. Remembering all of these things could be quite tricky. So we have this little feature down here called associations. And in the association screen, you can see all of the groups, all of the projects, and when you click on any one where these intersect, you can see who is active in that project, what equipment they have available, and where their data goes. It's quite a nice visual tool so that you can keep track of everything that is going on with all of the users. Now, for my system here, maybe not so important. We don't have that many users. We don't have that many instruments. When you start to get up to 30, 40, 50, 100 users with similarly 100 instruments or 200 instruments, using the data that you find in here to map and track what everybody is doing is certainly a very useful feature. So if we move on from this, at the bottom of this screen, we have some basically housekeeping. where we can see what connections have been made on the system. So I only have one connection. We also have the ability to limit access to the Compass data file. That's controllable within here. And the final two are about creating communication connections to some other systems. Something I don't think we need to spend any time on today. Let me see if I can get the participants that are in the list, the late arrivals. We'll see if we can get them in just quickly while I take a little bit of breath before we move on to the next section. Come on. Oh. So that is Configuration Manager. It is a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, but given our time constraints, I don't think we can do very much else. If we move on to the main section of Compass, just close that window, which is this icon here. When we come to the main section of Compass, it asks you for your username, and when you type in your username, it will show you which groups and projects you are allowed to access. So you can see I'm logged in here, and as this user, I have access to 2 different groups and only 1 project. If I choose a different user, I'll use just the default one just to show the principle. If I use that user, you can see he only gets 1, but and he only gets 1 project as well. But you can see it automatically populates what that user is allowed to do and what groups he may be associated with. So we are interested in this SCION training user, and I haven't set a password, so I can just press OK. So when we move into the main section of Compass, we can look at the various aspects of what Compass does. I'll try and go through a logical series of things that a user would normally do, from maybe building a method all the way through to completing a calibration curve and delivering a completed report. So if we started off to build a new method, we've already created the system within Configuration Manager. I can see a new method. The system that I want to use it with would appear in this box. You can see I only have 1 system. I can see next. We have to give the method a name, so maybe just give it today's date. Just see if we can get a few more of these late arrivals to come in. There we go. So when we're building a new method, the system tries to lay it out in terms of a logical sequence of things that you're going to do. Now, for our demonstration today, I have what's called a peak generator. So it will let me create a little chromatogram that we can show and demonstrate what Compass is doing and how we can get to our final calibration curve. But if we go through some of the sections of the method, if we look at the control section of the method, you can see all of the different aspects of the GC are populated here, and these reflect what we see in the actual GC. If I do home, you can see I have an auto sampler. I don't have any valves. What injector I may have, I can see all of these on the screen, and these are reflected in my method because the configuration of the GC is pulled through as part of the setup process within Configuration Manager. So I could set the various parameters for my method. We'll maybe just set that to a minute, because if we're going to do a run, we don't want it to take too long. Maybe we just 0.75. That'll be a bit quicker. And I'll reduce my stabilization time. Normally for your GC, especially if you're doing temperature programmed runs, you would want your stabilization time to be a suitable amount of time for the oven to have cooled to the correct temperature and be at a good starting point for your analysis. So I'll set this just to a low number because we want everything to work quite quickly. In the column of pneumatics, we can set what type of flow we want onto a column, whether we want to just have it pressure regulated or we want constant flow or constant linear velocity. All of these are achievable from within here, what detectors we might be doing. So for today's demonstration, I'll maybe just have one detector. So I could then set what the temperature was going to be, what the ranges are going to be, and if I maybe need to time program what the detector is going to do, that is also possible from within the Compass method. As we move on, we've got some more EFCs down here, things that we're maybe not going to use. We're more interested in Compass today than what the GC is actually doing. If we look at this other section, as I said, I have a little peak generator that allows me to create a couple of peaks. So we'll maybe just do 3 peaks just to see. We'll do something quite quick in here. And make that. We'll have some nice big peaks. No point in grubbing around in the noise for any peaks. We want them to be narrow. But as you can see, you can quite quickly build up a method. We want just a 0.75 minute run. We can set what the injection volume is going to be. We can also set what the run name is going to be for every run that we use this method with. So we could just give it a simple name, or test samples or something like that. And every time we run the method, our file name would be test samples, and then on the end, it would add the number 1. And every time we run it, it would increment that suffix 2, 3, 4, and so onward until you get to 1,000, and then it will roll over. So that's fine. It can be a little bit confusing. You can end up with a lot of names and not always certain when you did these things. So Compass has some nice features that let you control what the run name is going to be, and it will let Compass create that automatically. So when you do this automatically, you have what are called variables within Compass. Now, these are parameters that are used within the methods and within the data files to actually conduct the analysis. It records a whole long list of variables of data about each analysis. Now, you can use some of those variables. They change each time a new method is run or a method is executed or whatever's going on. So what I quite like is I can use the acquisition method name. Okay, so that's something I would remember. And another one that I quite like is the start runtime. So that way I know which method it was associated with, and I know when I did it. And both of those will appear in the file name. Now, you get additional information, you get creation dates and that kind of thing for data files, but this can be quite a quick way of scanning down the files that you're interested in and selecting the ones that you want. There are, of course, as you can see, other variables available on this list that if something was more appropriate to your situation, then you could choose one of those. One of the things about Compass is it is very flexible. It is very helpful in terms of being able to configure it to be suitable for your particular customer. Not everyone uses Compass in the same way as I do or as you do. And having that flexibility certainly makes it a very powerful tool. So I'll select these two for today. As my file name will now be unique every time because the start runtime will continually change, I therefore don't need a suffix. I don't need a number afterwards because I will always have a unique file name. If we look at some of the other sections, we are allowed to have a blank baseline that we maybe do some baseline subtraction. on our method, or sorry, on our data files. We can select which file that's going to come from. The next section, we have what's called integration events. Now, this is looking at the nuts and bolts of the analysis, if you like. This is well, is this a peak or is this not a peak? And is it just noise? Is it a peak that I'm not interested in? Or is the peak not separated well and I need some extra help to actually dissociate it from another peak or get it out of the baseline or whatever it is. So in here we have a long list of tools of different things that we can do to assist our detection of peaks and getting them separated from the baseline and even from each other. I'm not going to go through all of these different sections. You can see there are far too many to cover in a webinar like this. They are very easy to use. I'll show just a couple of quick ones here, just to let you see and get an idea of what might be possible. So what you frequently want to do is what would be described in other CVSs would be maybe an integrate inhibit or disable integration or some other description of it. What we call it within Compass is turn integration, where what you can do is at various time intervals, you can turn the integration on and off. So you may want to turn the integration off at the beginning of the run to ignore the solvent front. That's a very common thing to do. So for the first maybe 2-3 minutes until the solvent has completely eluted, you would not look at any peaks. And then maybe after something like 2 minutes, you would turn the integration back on to start actually collecting data. And you can build up a very long or a very complex time program, adding all of these different events depending on what your chromatography looks like and the difficulties that you may have with your separations. These are very helpful tools and very useful. We have quite a nice feature if you build up a long list of these where you have lots of different events, do lots of different things depending on the runs that are going on. Sometimes for some samples, you may not want to use them. You want to collect all of the data, or you want to collect the data in a different way. What you can do is you can leave them on the list. You don't need to delete them. You can just disable them just by unticking. Then that feature is not used anymore. It's still on your list, and when you need it back, it is a simple case of coming back in, turning it back on, and you're ready to go. So very flexible, very versatile, very quick to make changes and do things with it. The next couple of items I'm going to skip over. We'll come back to these once we've made some injections, just to let you see. We'll talk about formats and some of the other things. So with this basic method that I've created, as you can see, just in a few minutes, I would now be at a point where I could collect some data. I'll just check everything's going to work the way that I hope. I think my runtime is only 0.75 minutes and my acquisition is just 0.75 minutes. Yeah, so we should all be good. With this basic method, I can just do a quick start and choose the method I want to run. So I want to run this method we've created right now. I can say OK. It then gives me a confirmation screen. Now, I can see something's not quite worked out the way that I hope, because I set that at 0.75. So I suspect what I have done wrong is I have not edited the correct section. No, I edited the correct section. So what went wrong there? Let's try that again. Quick start. We want this method, and we can say OK, and it's still showing, OK. So that's a little bit strange, but OK, let's just set that to 0.75. And we'll say start. And let's go look and see what we get for our analysis. Now, while our analysis is running, we can actually see what's going on, what it's doing. It says it's in pre-run. It says my GC is ready. It's waiting for the injection, and it's now gone to running. So hopefully we will get some data collected here. Yes, there we are. So my B channel is not doing anything. There's something definitely a bit strange going on here. We should see some peaks. We should have seen some peaks by now. Okay, this is what happens when you fly without a safety net. Sometimes things don't quite work out the way that you anticipate. So let's go back to our methods. Did think we had created all the sections that we needed. Yes. Did we do a save? Let's just close the method to be sure. And no, still no data. My run is finished. Let me try just a quick one again, just to confirm it's definitely broken and not going to work for me. There we go. That's looking much better. And start. Yes, I suspect in my haste to get through this that I forgot to press the save button. And of course, it didn't update the changes into my method until I pressed the save button. So as you can see, it's downloading the method. Taking just a minute or two to do it. Come on. Are we going to move on? It's not looking promising at the moment because we seem to be stuck in download method. Oh my goodness. Okay. The things I intended to show with these, yeah, we seem to be stuck. Not quite sure why it's stuck in downloading method. My GC is there. It's not running. Should be able to do it. Okay. We'll stop that run. Just say okay. Will we give it one last chance? One last chance to actually do it properly. Okay. Tick that box. Say start. And now it doesn't like it at all. Okay. I'm not going to play around with it anymore. Normally you can download this quite quickly and everything works in the way that you expect. But of course, when I'm showing it, when I'm demoing it, is when it all goes horribly wrong. And well, that's the nature of the beast sometimes, isn't it? No, definitely not going to do it. So the next aspect that I wanted to look at, if this had completed, was to look at some data files and see what data we actually got. Now, in preparation for this, did create some data files. You can see I have them here with some nice peaks. They already have all of the peak names. If I was going to do some work with these, I maybe wouldn't have any peaks identified. I could initialize from my chromatogram. I'm allowed to add peaks. I can give it what the peak name is and give it what the retention time is. Come on, there we go, 1.1 minutes. I can also select whether this peak will be calibrated as part of my calibration curve, or maybe it's just a peak that I measure in some other way where I don't actually use a calibration. So you can select which peaks are going to be calibrated and which peaks are not. When you select them in this column here, in this calibration column, they will then show up in your calibration screen. Now, you can see I've got quite a lot of data on the screen at the moment. One handy little feature is normally when I'm editing this, I wouldn't need my chromatogram to also be showing. So there's a handy little button, which is not always obvious at this point here. And if I just press that, my chromatogram is then hidden and I can see my calibration data with no difficulty. And that works in quite a few places. If I go to my results screen, you can see that it is missing my chromatogram. I can just press that button to get it back again. Quite a handy little feature that lets you control what's going on with what you're doing. So we have our peaks, we have our calibration data. So I have already populated these so that we can create a calibration curve today. I did anticipate that my system wouldn't work for some reason and did actually prepare these a little bit ahead of time. You can see from the chromatogram or from the data file, I have two internal standards. I can select which peak is going to be my internal standard, and I can also select for every other peak which internal standard I intend to use for that one. You are allowed almost as many as you like internal standards so that they can be associated with the peak of interest to ensure that you get the best match in terms of performance and response from the GC to do your internal standard calculation. If we look at some of the other features on the screen here, we have different types of calibration available. We can do just straightforward area percent or response percent. We can normalize everything. When we normalize, we not only have that choice, we can choose to normalize to some other value other than 100%. I'm not quite sure, but that's not true. I can think of a couple of situations where that would be helpful. Maybe you don't get a full recovery from the column and you want to only normalize what's actually eluted rather than to 100%, which may be a better reflection on what your results might be. We have an external standard, which, as its name suggests, means you have no internal peaks that you're doing a calculation against. And finally, internal standard. We have a few other calibration types that can be available. They take a little more effort. They are not the sort of standard types that you would normally see. The one I'm thinking of is standard addition. We certainly have a procedure that allows you to set that up within your method so that each time you run the method, your standard addition is actually calculated. Each calibration curve that you create exists as a separate file. We do not include the calibration file we include it inside the method and we include it inside the data file, but it is a standalone file that you can associate with other methods or with other data files. To choose another calibration curve, you can just press open and select which one you would like to use for this particular data file. So it allows you the ability to create a calibration curve with one set of data files and then use that calibration curve in a different method or for a different set of files. A very useful feature and means that the calibration curve is actually independent of the data that you use, the data that was used to create it. If we move on a little bit, when we look at our chromatogram, we may want to change what we can see and what it looks like. Maybe we don't like what the peak names look like. Maybe we want them to be a little bit different. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that. We can do it from within the method. We have this section called formats, and in formats you can see what my chromatogram format will look like, what my peak report might look like. So if we concentrate on the chromatogram format, I can choose edit in there, and I'm allowed to change quite a few things. I can change what the peak annotations are. Maybe I would like them to be a different font, or maybe a bigger font. Let's just do a bigger font just to see. So if I say OK, you can, and then OK, you can see they get much larger. I not only have to do it from within there, I can also do it from my chromatogram. If I just right-click on my chromatogram, I can choose properties, and it will take me to the same screen and allow me to change any of these things. I have some options. I can have it be oblique, or I can have it to be horizontal. I can change what my line looks like. I can change what the thickness looks like, what the style is. Lots of customization is possible in what your chromatogram looks like on the screen. Not only that, once you have done that, once you have made these changes and you get it on the screen, yeah, that's what I want my chromatogram to look like. Using the formats function, I can then just save that to a library. I can save the current format. It will ask me to give it a name, and I can then apply that same format to my report style or in other places that you may want to see a visible or that the chromatogram is actually visible. The other place that, or the other thing that I should mention when we're in here is we have what's called the peak report. So just now we can't see the peak report on the screen, so let's go to that. So my peak report at the moment looks like this. So I have my peak names, I have the retention time, what my calculated quantity might be, height, area percent. Maybe these are things that I want, or maybe they're not. I could use my format section again to control that, or again, I can just press a right click and choose report properties, and I can select what things I maybe want in my report. Maybe I'm not so interested in what the height is. Maybe the area in volts per minute is not what I'm interested in. Maybe I want it to be the area in microvolts per second, so I can just select from the list. I probably do want the area percent. Maybe I want to look at the asymmetry of some of my peaks, so I could add that to the table, or maybe I want to look at my peak width, or any one of a long list of different parameters that would be associated with an individual peak in any chromatogram. Maybe the number of theoretical plates. One of the things about this list is you can see, well, what does that mean? What does that description mean? It's quite difficult to understand. Left half width, 60 to 7%, or what does that mean? Well, handily within Compass, we do actually describe underneath exactly what that means and what we're going to do about it. Internal standard manual RF, this variable is true, so it tells you what they are going to do and what effect that is going to have on the peak chromatogram or the peak result that you get. So yeah, I probably did actually want to change those. Let me just make some modifications. So I wanted that to be removed. I wanted that to be added, and we'll maybe look at what the asymmetry looks like. So I've made these changes, and they instantly appear on my peak report. Okay, and what I see here is basically what I will see in my printed report. So I can go and have a quick look at that just by pressing that button. Yeah, you can see the writing is quite big. You can see I've got a couple of other things on there too. I see we've still got some people waiting in the lobby, so I can't actually get to the button. My apologies, I can't actually get to the button on my screen because of that, so bear with me and we'll let a few more participants in. So we've looked at a few of the different things that are in here. We've looked at how we can populate this quite quickly just by doing initialize from chromatogram and then updating. We can copy individual peaks, we can delete peaks. We probably want to delete this extra one that we created, so I'm allowed to just delete selection. Did that not happen? Let's try that again. Delete selection. Okay, and it does ask you for a confirmation. You also have this thing called groups. Now, there are occasions where you want to provide a result for a group of peaks, and that's very straightforward to do. We want a result group. We can then select what we are going to get. You can see there are two tabs at the top here. We can select whether we want just to add individual peaks. So I could say, right, I want to add peak 6, peak 7, and peak 8. Oh, I picked 5. Okay, we wanted 8. Remove. and add peak 8. So that will now appear as a result group. And if I go and look in my results, I won't see it just quite yet, because although I've told it that's something I want to do, it hasn't actually calculated it. How I could get it to calculate it would be either to reprocess the chromatogram or just do a simple integration. So we have just an integrate button. What the integrate button does is calculate the results, but it doesn't execute any additional commands. It doesn't execute that maybe I have a plugin or maybe I do something else with the data file. It only does the sums, if you like. And you can see for those 3 peaks, I now have a result. Maybe I want to give that a bit better name, so I could go back to my group identification and call it, I don't know, peak 5, 6, and 7. I chose 6, 7, and 8. 6, 7, and 8. And once I've entered that again, I can cancel. I can then just reprocess that, and it should update into my group report. Okay, so you can very quickly build up a method, change what that method looks like, change what that method does. There are a few more things down here that we don't really have time to do today. So the last one that I'm going to look at on this list for the moment will be what the report looks like, what that actually comes out to be, and how it would look for your finished report. So I have this default standard. I can edit my report. You can see I've edited it in the past, where I've added maybe the customer's logo to the report. So this is the report template, and it's in a style of what's called as what you see is what you get. So if you can envision this screen that you can see as your page or as your piece of paper, what you see on here is the various sections that will appear on your piece of paper. Adding and removing sections is very straightforward. So I have this additional chromatogram here. I can just remove that. Maybe I want to add the group results that I created a bit earlier. I can just click the button and then drop them on the page, make them just a little bit wider. If I then save my report, I can close that one, and I can then see what that would look like as my new result. So there is my peak result, and there is my group result. I'll zoom in on those just so you can actually see them. Okay, so again, it's a very quick editing tool. You can get quite a professional looking report quite quickly just by dragging and dropping a few items from the menu bar. We have most of the sections available. You can have just labels. You can have text boxes. You are, of course, allowed pictures. You're allowed tables. And from within Compass, we have a long list of different things you can add. Maybe you want the method in there, or maybe you want the calibration curve, or maybe the system suitability report, electronic signatures. Most of the sections, or all of the sections that you are likely to need, can be created within this report editor. If we move on a little bit, the next thing I would like to look at would be to create a calibration curve from the data files that I've collected. Now, you could update all of the things that you have changed in here, so all of the things that you have added. You can update those to the data collection method simply by pressing update method. All of the things you've changed, all of the things that you've added to make this a useful method for your purposes, then go back into the global method, and every time you run that method for an analysis, the formatting and the reporting and the additional functionality that you want goes into the data file every time. So with that in mind, I'll just close this chromatogram. I'm going to say no to save all of those changes for the moment. So one of the ways I could do that is to simply run my method multiple times and it would create my calibration curve. That would be a way that I could go about it. That certainly works, and it definitely is a way of operating. Quite often what happens in that situation, though, is that you do your analysis and for some reason one of the standards goes wrong. One of the standards is out of tolerance or something happens. And what quite a few customers do is they basically just run everything as an unknown. Okay, they just run all the samples and then they come back and they reprocess the samples after they have reviewed what the data looks like. So for my particular case, I could maybe open up my list of chromatogram standards if I can get the mouse to roll over the part I want. I can open the chromatogram. You can see I have my various levels already built. So level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I can select all of those just by pressing the Shift key, selecting the first one, selecting the last one, and it will open all of these data files for me. And you can see that my calibration might look quite good. It might be not too bad. If I zoom in on one of my peaks, so I can zoom in on any particular peak just by clicking and right swiping. So yeah, my peaks look quite nice. There's not much I can go wrong with there. So I would want to process these to become my calibration curve. So again, I opened them quickly. There is a way to close them quickly. If I choose this close method or close chromatogram button, it shows me the list of open chromatograms. I can select them all, or I can just select the ones that I want to close, and then press the OK button. The next thing that I would want to do would be to build a simple sequence. So I could do a simple reprocessing list. So I could do new reprocessing list. How many lines do I want? Well, I'm not sure. I created a sequence to do my injections. So maybe I have well, I don't have a sequence. So, oh well, I have to create a new one. So we'll say 5 lines. I know I have 5 levels in my standard. I maybe have a couple of data files as well. So let's add another 3 onto that, and we'll have 8 lines. Again, we'll just give it today's date. Just to get this going. Now again, to add chromatograms to this, it can be quite quick. So I can select the file that I want just by pressing this button, and I can then select a list of files. And what it will do is automatically populate the reprocessing list with that list of files. Now I'll select all of those. I don't want to take that one though, because I'm not sure what that one is. The rest of them I know are my calibration curve and then my unknowns associated with it. And you can see that brings up my curve. And because I have run these data files in the correct way before, it automatically populates what are standards and what are unknowns. So supposing it didn't do that, let's say it just came up as all unknown just to go through the process. So we can fill the block and say OK, and you can see these are now all set as unknowns. And if I run this sample list or this reprocessing list, it would simply calculate that against the calibration curve. But what we want to show here is how quickly we could maybe rebuild this as the reprocessing list that I actually want. So I could select the first one as my standard because I know that's my level 1 data. And what I want it to do is I want it to clear the old points. So I want it to completely delete my existing calibration curve and create a fresh new one. This is my level 1 standard. Now to I could just go down the next one and add that one and the next one and add that one, but that's fine when you only have 4 or 5. When you have a long list, that becomes a little more problematic. So what I can do is, I don't know if you noticed, when I moved my mouse, it sort of went from a left pointing mouse to a left pointing pointer to a right pointing pointer. And when it does that, it allows me to just select items on this list. Okay, you can see I've only selected the first few, and if I then right click in here, I can choose fill block, and it will update all of the ones that I've highlighted, but only those, and the others remain unchanged. Okay, and similarly, I could do this in here, where I can choose fill block by right clicking, and on this occasion it gives me an increment, because you're unlikely to want to copy the calibration level all the way down. You can certainly get it to do that. One of the ways you can get it to do that is by making the increment be 0. And if you make the increment 0, you can see my calibration level becomes 1 all the way down. That's not actually what I want. So I can choose fill block. I want a 1 increment, and it will add that to my list. If we look at some of the other features just on the left-hand side here before we move on, we can select which channel. Maybe your GC has multiple channels. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 detectors. Selecting which channel this is going to affect. You can also change which method you use. One of the things I mentioned earlier was the method that I used to create my data and create my calibration curve was, or create my data was different from the one that I used for my calibration curve. So I have this calibration curve method that has all of my parameters in it. I can select which one I use to create the curve, and then select which methods will use that curve. So having it as a standalone file does make it a very flexible choice. The other things that I might have, because I have an internal standard method, you can see I need to enter what my internal standards might be. In this case, I've set them both to 1, but those would normally be your actual internal standard weights for the particular compounds that you're interested in. We also have a thing called user inputs, which is maybe any additional variables that you've added to the method. You can change those here as well. This screen is identical to the screen that you would see when making injections. So for my reprocessing list, I basically built it from scratch. Hasn't taken very long to run it because it's quite a quick method. I can just run it quite quickly, say yes. And as you can see, it can get through the reprocessing list quite quickly. I could then go and review my data and see whether this will work. Maybe the first thing I should go do would be to have a look at my calibration curve. So here's my today calibration curve. Open that one. Oh, something's gone wrong with one of my points. You can see it's something just not quite right there. If that happened in my real live data, it would be possible just to remove that point. And there I have my nice calibration curve. You would have to investigate why that point is out of where it's supposed to be. Maybe something's gone wrong with that sample, with the high level sample. There's clearly something not right with the calibration levels and all of that. So you could just disregard it, or you could rerun the sample, or see what other solutions there might be to solve that particular problem. Now, the last thing that I would maybe want to look at today would be how could I review all of these data files in one place, creating what we call a summary report, where instead of having to go to each individual sample, I could open each individual chromatogram and have a look and see what they all look like. So there we are. My internal standards look remarkably good. They are all very well overlaid. But some of my peaks, you can see the areas have varied a little bit. So there will be some deviation from what the actual result is. That would be something that I would want to see. The percentage RSD is a very important number when carrying out analysis to get some sort of idea of the certainty for your sample. You know, how sure are you that this sample is actually what you say it is? How we could do that, I think I already have a summary report that I created. No, I don't have one. Okay, we could quickly create a summary report just to see what that looks like. So we could do new summary report. We want to add our chromatograms. So our chromatograms are down the bottom here. There we go. So we're interested in these chromatograms. Say open. We also need a method to process these with. So I'll choose my Cal Curve method, say open, and it then says, okay, which detector. So I want that detector, and then add a variable. We are interested in either the area. So we could do area per second to look at the raw peak data. Or if you wanted to look at the internal standard data, so the calculated data, then you would maybe choose quantity, because the area only shows you what the actual area was, and the quantity is the calculated against what the internal standard might be. I'll choose only one at the moment, so maybe choosing the internal standard would be a better choice, or choosing the calculated amount would be a better choice. And say OK. It takes a moment just to populate that. I would then want to see all of my peaks. So I will choose 10 because I have 10 peaks, and I can then quickly see what that looks like. So if I just make that full screen, and there you can see what my RSDs might look like and what my result is for every single peak that I have on my list. You can see the standard deviation. It also gives you the control charts for each of those peaks. So you can see what the variation looks like. Maybe there are some trends in the data. Maybe it's trending down or trending up. Again, it would allow you to see that quite quickly. You could add. So I'll say yes to save that summary report. Again, we'll give it just today's date. Just to save it in there. If I wanted to add that or add each data file that I create to my summary report, that is something that is very straightforward to do in the method file. You can choose add and then select the summary report that you're going to use. And when that's saved back to the method, every time you run the method, the results from that method will be added to the summary report. And that way, you simply open the summary report. You don't even need to edit it or change it, and it will show you the current data for that batch of samples. That's basically all I have for today. I'm sure you have some questions as to other features and other functions that Compass might be able to do. This was literally just a whistle-stop tour of all the different things that are there and the versatility and how the workflows can be very quick to actually deliver results and reports very fast for your laboratory and to get the results that you need. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure there will be some questions. Let me just minimize that one and stop sharing my screen. I'll then be able to see the the participants and what questions there might have been. So is there anybody got any questions? I'm not seeing any in chat. No questions. I will take verbal questions if you don't want to type anything. No, nobody. There we go. There we go. Some Q&A. Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty in actually scrolling down in the Q&A. Let me just get it. On the internal standard calibration, is there any way to specify a standard weight? Yes, there is. You can specify that in two different places. You can either do it you can do it in here, where you can specify what the actual weight is. You can do that up front in the method. You can do it in the data file. You can also add it as part of your sequence. So the peak generator is a standard function that is available on the DVD. I think I have a version of the DVD. I can show you that on here. So if I go to my documents folder, I have a copy of, so this would be the contents of the normal DVD that you would see. So if you look on it, it has all of these files. If you look in the, sorry, I need to share my screen again. I had assumed I was still sharing. So if I just share that screen again, just to let you see. So what I did was browse to the DVD. You can see all of the DVD files there. If you go to drivers and then scroll down until you see internal drivers, if you install that internal drivers, that will allow you to have the peak generator that may be useful in some situations for you. Any other questions? Anything else anybody would like to know or like to see before we finish up for today? No. Chrome Sync. So hang on till we get to the chat. So people are starting putting things in the chat. Bear with me. Yes, you can take a snapshot. So the snapshot feature, I unfortunately couldn't get to work today, or it didn't work today because my acquisition method didn't work. So if I was doing a quick start, if I can get it to do something today, just say start. Let's see if we can get it to work this time. I suspect it won't. So there is a snapshot feature that will allow you to see what peaks have actually emerged and then grab what they are. So you can see it's trying to cool my injector because my method has a setting of 50 degrees, but normally you would just press this button here. It will take a snapshot and then open the data file showing the peaks that I've already eluted and what the results for each of those might be. Chrome Sync I will deal with in a later edition of these webinars, where I'll talk about all of the different features and functions that can be used as plugins and different things that we can do. Is there any others in the chat or any more in the Q&A? Yes, I think I've answered all of those. Is there a way to specify standard weight? Yeah, and somebody realized I wasn't sharing my screen. Unfortunately, I couldn't see the chat when I was presenting. Is the software compatible with data from other company machines like Agilent? Yes, it certainly is. you can use a feature called import data, where from the other CDS you can export in various formats. You can export as an AIA or as XY data or some other types. From within Compass, you can then, I'll just share my screen. That one. From within Compass, you can then do a file, open, and if you choose open chromatogram, you will be able to see the other file types actually in here. You can simply select them and they will open and import automatically. Alternatively, you can choose import and you can import ASCII files, which would be XY data that you could import and then manipulate those chromatograms. Let me see if I can see any other chat on here. Okay, nothing else in the chat. Does it allow MS data? No, unfortunately, MS data is not available within Compass CDS. You would have to use MS Workstation for that. Any other questions? Anything anybody's not sure of, or you want me to demonstrate today? How is the element integration event in the report style? So you can control what that looks like either using the formats section. So whether there are peak annotations and what they might look like. So integration on, integration off, whatever the integration event feature is, you can control exactly what that looks like. You can see what it would look like on my screen, which is this blue marker that is shown here. If I go and switch on some more integration events, I'll put something a little bit later on in the run, maybe at 0.5. That will automatically show up instantly on the screen. Any other questions? Anything else you would like me to show? No. If we are all done, thank you very much indeed for attending today. Apologies for the little bit of shaky start at the beginning. That did phase me just a little, but I think we got to see quite a lot of features and quite a lot of functions that are within Compass. So certainly still worthwhile. I think we covered quite a lot of things in the time allowed. We've got some more Q&A. Let's just scroll down to the Q&A. Intelli update, again, that's something I'll show in a later webinar. We need some support for GCMS SCION 451. If you contact me by email, I'm more than happy to try and help you with your 451 GCMS. That will be no problem. Okay, any more? No, people are starting to leave. Thank you.